Welcome to the Get It Done podcast. I'm your host, Jimi Ryan. Today we have Tony Blodgett. Tony is a SVP in the Northwest region of New American Funding. He's a 24-year mortgage loan officer veteran. He's the former president of the Washington Mortgage Bankers Association. In 2020, he helped to serve 4,000 families. And all of that is great, but I know him as a passionate leader, a husband, a father, and a Jeep enthusiast. Tony, welcome to the Get It Done podcast.
Right on, Jimmy. Hey, thanks for the intro, and I'm super excited to be here. So it's gonna be fun.
Hey, man, for sure. So I want to jump right into it, but before I do, is there anything that I missed in my brief edification of you?
No, 24 years in the mortgage business. I'm a CMB. That's something I'm super proud of, and not everyone knows what that is. But it's a certified mortgage banker. It's a designation that's given out by the MBA, and I would argue it's not an easy thing to do. It's quite a bit of studying. It took me a little while. You have to there's an application process just to kind of be eligible. And then it's a 6-hour written exam and between 45-minute and 2-hour oral exam as well. So I'm pretty proud of that. There's only a handful of CMBs in the state of Washington where I live.
Oh.
And it's kind of an exclusive group. So that's the only other thing I would mention, just because I worked my butt off for that. And I like to talk about it.
Hey, well, just to touch on it just a minute, what is it? Like what's hard about it? I guess here, if I've been in the mortgage industry, let's just say for 13 years, what would I learn through going through a program like that?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, it's not just about education. There's an education portion of the application process. You have to meet. It's really like a point system. You have to have 150 points to be able to apply, but it has to do with obviously education and whatnot, but also industry involvement. Like you mentioned, I was the past president of the Washington Mortgage Bankers Association. So there's not just an education component. You have to really be involved in the mortgage industry. And then the thing about the test is that there's 6 different areas that you're going to be tested on, and they range in every area of mortgage banking. And so the challenge is for a loan originator like you or me coming up kind of through the sales side of this business, is that there's questions about servicing and hedging and pipeline management and servicing and regulatory stuff that we just wouldn't be exposed to. And so it really is necessary for most people to get some specific education. And the MBA does offer School of Mortgage Banking that will cover these areas. And then there's a lot of studying in order to be able to pass that written exam. And then the oral exam is actually interesting too, because it's different every time, and it's based on the white papers that are published by the MBA. So essentially, it's all of the current relevant topics that are important to the mortgage industry, and you have to be very well versed on each of them, and also understand what the MBA's position is on each of those particular topics, and be able to speak to them in a way that represents the MBA's position. Not that you're not allowed to have your own opinion, of course, but they want to know that you understand why the MBA has the stance that they do. So
Wow.
That's a little bit unique as well.
Wow. I mean, that seems pretty intense. I would have thought there was just like some modules and just like, hey, you pass this little test. That seems pretty intense.
Well, that's why there's only like 5 people in the state of Washington that have their CMB.
I believe it. That seems super hard.
Active in the industry. Let me clarify. There's a lot of people that have had it in the past.
For sure. Well, part of the Get It Done podcast is really about your come up story. And we use Elon Musk as an example. I'm sure it's a story from, $1 million to $1 billion. And that's a great story. But what we really want to hear is the 0 to $1 million story. And the best place to start that out is, Tony, where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in Redmond, Washington, but when I was super young, like maybe 2 years old, I moved to Arlington, Washington, which is where I grew up, and I still live just a few minutes down the road from there. Arlington is a small town, and we lived, 12 miles out of town at the base of the foothills. So very, very remote. My closest neighbor was probably, a mile away. So luckily I had 2 brothers and we had a lot of woods and I had 2 brothers to play with. And that was kind of the extent, at least in my early years, because I didn't like living in a neighborhood or a cul-de-sac or anything like that. So I grew up in Arlington. Like I said, it was But I'm happy. I'm glad I wasn't in the city. It was kind of a simple life, if you will.
Well, yeah, and glad you mentioned that. I follow you on social, and I see your kids driving around in a similar, in like their what's it called, their little four wheelers, all going around in a similar type of setting in the woods, outdoors. You strike me as just an outdoor enthusiast, especially with your Jeeps. I see you driving around. Did you what was childhood like? What were your parents like?
Yeah, so I grew up with my mom and my stepdad, and both, blue collar truck drivers, and worked for the school district for a period of time. At pretty much all of my time I was in high school or in school, one of them worked for the school district. Usually, they were both bus drivers for the school district. And what was nice about that, obviously, is they had the same holidays as we did in school, and so that was nice. But they would be up early and out of the house. So we were those kids in the 80s, early 90s that, got up, packed your own lunch, got yourself off to school. And same thing when we got home. They called us latchkey kids, right? Back in the day, you'd ride the bus home and you wouldn't see your parents for hours, until they got home from work, and we just kind of fended for ourselves. And I'm sure there was some mischief that happened in those hours that we were alone, but no one died, and we had a lot of fun, and you learn to take care of yourself. And so that was kind of our childhood, but it was good. And we didn't have a lot of money just because of the type of work, but it never felt that way. I never felt like we didn't have whatever we needed to be happy. So.
I mean, didn't grow up lavishly, but you had enough. You didn't know you were poor, type of a thing. But look, you weren't getting a brand new car when you were 16, type of thing. And
No.
tell me about fending for yourself. What do you think? How do you think that making your own lunch, coming home and having to take care of yourself? How do you think that affects you even now today?
Yeah, well, look, I think that when you're put in a position where you got to be responsible for yourself, you have no choice but to grow up and be responsible. The other thing I did when I was 10 years old, I joined martial arts. My best friend at the time, who lived about 3 miles down the road, we rode the bus together, and he was in karate, and so he encouraged me to do that. And that too is the same sort of deal, right? I mean, it's really all about personal discipline and responsibility and respect. And, it was a very traditional Japanese style of karate that I took. And I think all those themes have ran all throughout my childhood of just, being responsible, taking care of yourself. I was really told by my stepdad growing up that you can do anything that you want to do. Really, there is no rules as long as you don't hurt somebody or take something that belongs to somebody else. That was our governing rule. And then keep yourself out of trouble. I was also told that, look, as long as I got good grades and didn't get called to the office, my parents didn't really get too involved in whether or not they didn't crack down on me, or are you doing your homework tonight or whatever. It's like, hey, we're going to look at your grades, and if your grades are good, we're going to assume that you're being responsible with the time and getting things done that you have to. And so it was nice. I had a lot of freedom, but I knew that freedom would be taken away quickly if I didn't remain responsible. And so I've always been kind of driven by that responsibility.
I honestly think, Tony, you are the most well-behaved person I've ever interviewed. Like honestly, just speaking, but truly though, it's got to have to do with the fact that you're making your own lunch. Hey, make your own lunch or you don't eat. That's probably a big thing. But also, martial arts is that's pretty intense when it comes to respect, and I guess just doing the right thing. Honor, is a word that strikes me. What would you say? How would you say that affected you as I guess, as a kid growing up? Do you think that you would have turned out the way you did if you didn't do that?
I don't think so. I give a lot of credit to that. It wasn't, like I said, I started when I was 10 years old. And
Yeah.
so all the way until my early 20s, I was involved, and I was on the competition team. So it was 6 days a week. I would take a couple classes per day. I would try to take the adult classes if I could, which just required you to not act like a kid because you're in an adult class. And if you know anything about martial arts and the way that the belt system works, once you get up a couple rungs, you're really expected to lead by example, and mentor the students that are coming up, in the lower ranks. And so there's kind of this built-in mechanism in martial arts. I assume it might vary by school, but at least in our school, there was a responsibility to contribute, and so I did that and taught classes and all those things. And yeah, Jimmy, it's hard to say, right? What would I be like if I didn't have that experience? But I definitely look back and look at the way I conduct myself really all the way, into business as well. And I look back fondly on the things that I learned through that experience.
What'd you end up getting to, like, belt wise? Like, is that like, I mean, you get like degrees of black belts. I'm not familiar with it, so I'm sorry if I'm not hip to the slang, I guess, with it. But I guess, what did you get? What did you get up to with it? Where'd you end up?
Yeah. So when I quit when I was about 17, 18, right around the time when I was going to school, and I was what they call an HQ, which is like a 3rd degree brown belt. It's really the step right before black.
Okay.
And it was, getting your black belt and was a big milestone. And I just didn't have the time to commit to get there. So I actually went back in my early 20s, and probably around 21 to 23. I don't remember exactly when, but I went back, rejoined the school, got myself kind of back up to speed. And I did test for my black belt. I actually was able to go to Japan, and I tested for my black belt in Kyoto, Japan, at a tournament they have there every year. And so I actually got my black belt personally, certificate handed to me from the soke of our style, which is like the founder. He was like the lineage of the founder of this Okinawan style Shitaru that I took. And so I got a chance to meet him. He was in his late 90s. He passed away soon after that. But I stayed committed to competitions and ended up going back to Japan a couple of years later and tested for my Nidan, or my 2nd degree black belt. So I kind of, stepped away soon after that from karate, but I'm a 2nd degree black belt.
Wow, well, that's super cool. Yeah. I mean, black belt, what's up? I mean, I think that's super cool. Going back to childhood, a lot of times people have, some pivotal moments in childhood. It strikes me as like, look, you probably avoided a lot of pain that a lot of people have just simply because of the honor and the respect. Like, you put your work in, into karate, into martial arts. I shouldn't say karate, that's probably the wrong words, but martial arts. Anything pivotal happened for you when you were a kid?
I'm not sure. When I was something that happened that I don't remember was when I was, I think, 2.5, 3 years old. I contracted like a skin. It was like a zoster. It's like I don't know. It was blisters that kind of grew on my face when I was like 2.5 years old. And I don't remember the experience. It wasn't, the doctors didn't know what it was though. And so the treatment they used for it didn't really work. And I ended up with scars on my lip and my nose and stuff like that. And, it's not that bad today, but when I was younger, it really affected me. It was something that I was very self-conscious about for a long time. And it was something that, unfortunately, kids at school, sometimes would, say things that weren't super nice. And so that wasn't something that it happened so early, I don't remember it, but it definitely was something that impacted the way I behaved. And, just my self-confidence, to be honest with you, when I was much younger. And I've gotten over that. But if I'm thinking back to what are pivotal things that impacted me psychologically as a kid, that was definitely, one of them. I
can only imagine.
Yeah, well, kids can be brutal, dude.
Kids are brutal for sure, 100%. I mean, it's like, if it's on your face, I mean, what can you can't hide from it, It reminds me of what Barry Habib says, confidence is fleeting as heck, man.
Yeah.
We're all self-conscious to a certain degree, and just like, I mean, that, and as a kid, you're right, it's just so brutal. How'd you recover from it? I guess, what did you just grow out of it, or what?
I think I just grew out of it. I mean, people that know me now tell me that they think I'm like the most confident person or one of the most confident people that they meet. And so I don't know what caused the transition, to be quite honest with you. I mean, maybe it was back to the martial arts and that, I don't know. I just remember early childhood being very self-conscious about it. And it definitely impacted me, and it just makes you, I'm a very open, outgoing person. And when you kind of have that self-confidence issues when you're younger, you're more closed in, and you don't
Right.
get to really express who it is that you are. And yeah, I think I just grew out of it, man, to be honest with you. I just got comfortable in my own skin. And look, everyone has issues. There's people who have things way worse than what I had. And I think just realizing as you get older that you're probably lucky to have what you do have. And then a lot of people have it way worse. And you grow out of it. But it was tough in like elementary school.
Right. But yeah, I mean, the experience of it really makes it so that, you can move forward, and you are a very confident man. I mean, you really are. You get up in front of a group of people and give a speech and not doing anything twice. I mean, that takes a lot of confidence, and sure, you put in the work, but it still is something that, does require that. And it probably gave you a tough skin.
Yeah, the first time I got in front of a group of people and gave a presentation, it was the worst experience that I ever had. And people now go, man, you're so natural, and yeah, I do public speaking. I run a large region, so I'm constantly in front of groups of people doing presentations and whatnot. And it is, look, it's something you learn over time, but man, I think Barry's right. Your confidence can get eroded very quickly. And when you're not prepared, then things can go really bad. I remember I used to, we did some commercials at my previous company. And so I do these commercials, and we did like this mortgage minute thing that was, we did it at the news studio. It was on TV. And I would go in and I would read through the script and I would just nail it the first time. And they're like, "Oh, you're amazing." And they call me One Take Tony. And I'm like, if you only knew how many times last night I rehearsed this thing over and over and over again, and really spent the time. But then you go show up and you do it, and they go, "Oh, look at that. That was, you're a natural." I'm like, you have no idea.
Right. You put in the work is really what they saw. And I mean, that's great. And I really love that, because literally KJ and I, we go back and forth. We say, like, "Listen, brother, I'm One Take Jimmy," and then I'll take like 10 takes sometimes. So I mean, then I'm like, I'm One Take Jimmy. I thought it was, but a lot of times, really, the best time is your first take anyway. But it's cool that you're putting in the work. Talk about, so okay, we transitioned from high school to, did you go to college?
I did not go to college.
That's awesome. Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't really think about it, to be honest with you. It was not even a thought. There was no way to really pay for college as far as I was concerned. And, look, I was raised with this idea, and I think, my parents were probably joking, but I didn't take it as a joke. They said, "Hey, for your 18th birthday, you're getting a suitcase and a road map." And that was always like the ongoing joke when I was growing up. So I figured, look, I'm 18. I moved out of my parents' house 2 weeks after I graduated high school. And college wasn't a thought, man. I was working 2 jobs while I was in high school, and I had bills, and I had to go, I had life to live, and I was an adult now. And so, yeah, I didn't think about college. I'll tell you what, though, I'm glad at the end. I look at where I'm at today, and not that I'm glad I didn't get the education. I'm just glad I started when I did, because, soon after that is when I got in the mortgage business. And a few years after that, I was buying my first home when all my friends were getting out of college. Right. So
Right.
yeah, things work out the way they're supposed to.
Well, let's before we get to mortgage, I want to talk about your first job. So I always loved hearing this. You're working 2 jobs in high school. That's awesome. Gosh, I
Yeah.
love that. I wish I had that discipline back then. I really wish I did, because I feel like I'd be much further. But what were your first few jobs? When was it, and then what was it?
Yeah, I can literally count how many jobs I've had in my life, like on one hand. So
Wow.
I have not had a lot of jobs. So the first job I had, it was kind of an under the table, right? There was a guy that lived a couple miles down the road from me. He had 40 acres, and I would work for him starting when I was 12 years old. And man, I was doing stuff. If my parents knew what I was doing, running chainsaws, and he was logging his property, I was setting chokers and all sorts of stuff, when I was way too young and not in a very safe environment to be doing it. But I made a lot of money. I made, paid me $5 an hour cash. I'd get up every weekend at 6 a.m. He'd pick me up, take me to breakfast, and we'd go work on his property all weekend. And look, if I stayed home, I was going to have to work at my parents' property. So it was like, I'd rather at least go work for this guy and get paid. So I did that until I was 15 and a half, and I could actually work legally. And then,
wait, hang on a second. So chainsaw. So like, I mean, like, look, I bought a chainsaw, my first one when I think I was 32. And look, I swear to you, the guy at the place, he saw me like looking at it. He's like, listen, Jimmy, this isn't a toy. You need to respect this. He made sure to like tell me this. You're telling me this guy literally is like, here's a chainsaw, go at it?
Well, dude, I ran a chainsaw since I was really, really young. We typically used wood, to heat our home was our primary source of heat. We had baseboard heaters, but so we cut 6 cords of wood every year. And so I've been running a chainsaw and splitting wood and doing that kind of stuff.
To someone who doesn't know, what does 6 cords of wood look like? Like what?
Well, I think a cord of wood is like, what is it, like 4 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot? So
I'm actually one of the people that doesn't know, by the way. Actually.
Yeah, I think it's 4 foot by 4 foot or by 2 foot or something like that. I'm not an expert, but then 6 of those. So, basically a huge woodshed full every year, right?
Yeah. And you'd go through the whole thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So cool. Okay. So, I mean, you're
not really that cool, actually.
I don't know. It's cool when you're a kid. Yeah, I'm chainsawing. I don't know. Actually, yeah, that's hard.
Cool the first couple times, it gets old. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's certainly hard work. Well, okay, so let's move up. $5 an hour. You're like, man, I made so much money. It was $5 an hour.
Okay, so I'll tell this story really quick. So I worked for that guy, and then I thought I was like good because I had money saved up, and I owned a car. I bought a car when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And I started driving it when I was 16 years old. And then
What was it? What was your first car?
It was a 1979 Ford Courier pickup truck. Oh yeah, it was brown.
Awesome.
It was a piece, but you know what? I loved it, and it was great. And I had a car, but I like so many 16-year-olds. I got in an accident, and I totaled my car. And I thought I wasn't going to have to work. I got a car. I got money saved up. I'm like, I'm living the life. And I think I was a sophomore in high school. And I wrecked the car, and I'm back on the school bus. And I'm like, oh man, there's no way I'm back on a school bus. Right. And so my uncle had a Volkswagen Bug that he had bought for my cousin, and whatever, she hadn't achieved the grades to get the car. So he said, hey, you can buy it, but you have to have a job. And then you can make me monthly payments. And I'm like, okay. So I go to school the next day. I look at the school bulletin. It says there's jobs available in the career center. I go down to the career center. I go apply for this job. I get it. It's at a magazine distributor. And so I started working there when I was 15 and a half years old. Wasn't even 16 yet. Didn't have a car at the time. So I worked there, got my first paycheck, made him my first payment. This is my first debt that I had, was this Volkswagen Bug on $100 payments to my uncle. And how
much was it? How much did he sell it to you
and
for?
I've been in debt ever since. I'm just,
well, right. How much did he sell it to you for?
It was like $2,000 or $1,500 or something.
I mean, that's like 20 months of payments. It's kind of a lot.
It's a lot. I'm not gonna lie. I think it was $1,500 to be honest with you. I'm not sure, but anyway, I love that car.
Magazine distributor you're working at. I love how you found the job on the bulletin board at the school. Whether that dates you just a little bit, but also it's kind of cool. Like, where would a bulletin board exist nowadays? I'm just thinking like that. This would be like a Facebook marketplace thing or something like that. But so anyway, magazine distributor. What would you do there? Like what?
Oh yeah. So I ended up working there until I got in the mortgage business. But what I did was at the time, it was all the route trucks would go out and deliver magazines, and when they'd come back, I would check their oil. I would do the post check and all that, and then I would park them all in this big garage. And then I also would sweep floors and empty garbage cans for all the executives and stuff like that. Just janitorial type work. And then, but I wasn't making enough money. And so I got a second job. And so the second job was at Safeway, which is a grocery store. It's the same company that's like Ralph's, if you know them. But anyway, so I get a job at the grocery store, and now I'm really moving up because I was making like $5.75 an hour there, but this is a union job now, right? So now I'm in the union, and it's all looking good. But it was great because I would go to my first job. I would work until about 5 o'clock, and then I would get off. I would eat some dinner. I'd go to my second job at 6 o'clock and work till 10 o'clock. And actually, Jimmy, when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, I worked 48 hours a week. I worked every Sunday because the union pays time and a half on the weekends. And so I made more money actually my senior year of high school than I did after I graduated. Because once I graduated, I'm like, well, I need to choose one. And there was no way I was going to keep working weekends, man. Forget about working weekends.
Right.
So I took the warehouse job with the magazine distributor, and I ultimately ended up becoming a manager there. And I actually got my own route. So then I was driving the truck, which was really the top of the ladder in that particular job. I mean, once you're a route driver, you're set. And the next person seniority wise for me had 17 years seniority. So I could look 17 years in the future and be like, that's where I'm going to be in 17 years. Maybe I'll get another $1.50 raise or something. And so I knew at that point that that this was a dead end career for me, and I needed to do something different. I just didn't know what I would want to do, and that's when I got in the mortgage business. And I'll tell you that.
So real quick, what was the name of the magazine distributor? Is it still around?
Well, originally they were called Rainier News, and then they were acquired by a company called Aramark, which is a national company.
Yeah.
Aramark. They do food services, and they do.
They're in Wisconsin too.
Yeah, they're huge, and so they bought the company while I was still working there, and that's ultimately, Aramark was the company that I ended up leaving.
Okay, so you realize to set this up to your mortgage, because look, nobody ever that I've ever talked to says, like, I planned this. Like, I plan to go into mortgage. I plan to go into real estate. Some people, like, my dad was a realtor. This is real, whatever, but never in mortgage. It's never that.
Well, you don't know what I'm going to say next then.
Well, this is the thing. So, okay, you're at this dead end job. You look at this dude that's 17 years in the future to you, and he makes an extra $1.50. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but also it's just like, look, you're right. This is a dead end. I know exactly where this leads. This ain't for me forever. So you're already feeling this feeling. What happens then?
Yeah, you're gonna love this. So my dad, my real dad, I told you I grew up with my mom and my stepdad.
Right, your stepdad, right?
My real dad owned a mortgage company.
Oh my goodness.
So I didn't know anything about mortgage. All I knew is that he had a lot nicer house and a lot nicer cars than we did. And I'm like, that mortgage sounds like a pretty good gig. But I didn't know anything about it. I will say this though, 8th grade career day, you had to write down 3 jobs that you wanted. I wrote down loan officer. So I did in my back of my head, I wanted to be a loan officer, all along. So I'm working at Aramark, I'm driving the truck, and I actually had reached out to my dad's company a couple times. And I went there just like I would any other job. I filled out an application. I turned in my resume. I keep the resume with me, by the way. I have the resume with me. It talks about, how good I am at running a chainsaw and driving a tractor. Swear to God. Anyway,
very applicable,
Yeah, super applicable to the mortgage business. But anyway, I applied just like I would anywhere else. And unfortunately, just, it was a bad time. I was young, and I don't blame my dad for not, just ushering me in the door. But anyway, it didn't really go anywhere. I didn't get an interview. I didn't get a call back.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, it's fine.
I feel like, honest to God, if somebody came in with like an actual resume and like prepared to make, like, hey, I want to give mortgages a try, I feel like I'd hire them. I mean, because like you sought it out and you really did that. Like, that's kind of nuts. But okay, so
here's what happened. Here's the pivotal moment that happened, Jimmy. Right. You're gonna love this. So one thing, as you mentioned, my kids have dirt bikes and quads and stuff. So do I. And I had a dirt bike, and I got off my job one night, and I just bought all new gear, and I was feeling pretty zesty. And I went out to the area where we go riding, and I got in a pretty bad accident. And I wrecked my bike.
With
my dirt bike. I went over the handlebars. I broke my right wrist. I messed up my leg. I was in a cast. I fractured a few ribs. And look, when you're distributing magazines for a living, you carry around these big totes full of magazines. They're about 80 pounds. And I got a broken wrist and a cast up to here. And I lived on my own. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't do my job anymore. And that's where, kind of out of desperation, I called my dad. Like I said, I'd already applied there a couple times, but just didn't really hear back. And this time I was desperate, man. I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew my job was a dead end, but now I didn't physically know how I was even going to continue working there. And so I reached out to him and basically begged him. He didn't know about the motorcycle accident, by the way. He hates motorcycles and told me not to buy one. But he didn't know I had a cast on or any of that stuff. But I begged him, and just said, hey, and maybe guilt tripped a little bit, but there was some begging involved. And he said, okay, and he said, well, how much money do you make? And I said, well, I make about $12 an hour. And he goes, okay. He goes, look, I really don't want to hire you. I don't think it's going to work out. You're really young. You don't know anything about this industry, and it's 100% commission, but I'll give it a shot. I'm like, I can do it. I know I can do it. And so he agreed to pay me $2,000 for 3 months. And then I was on my own. And so I said, deal. And so I gave my 2-week notice, and I was still laid up on the couch. I really couldn't walk. And I show up to work the first day. My dad probably hates I tell this story, but it's a true story.
I love it.
I show up to work the first day, and I knew the receptionist there, and I'm like, hey, she's like, Tony, what are you doing here? I got my suit on, right? Tie, briefcase, cast. And and she goes, what are you doing here? I said, I'm the new loan officer. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, today's my first day. My dad hired me as the loan officer. She's like, Tony, your dad's been remodeling his house for like 4 months. I haven't really seen him in the office. Let me give him a call. And he goes, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And he's like, well, tell him to come out and help me at my house, with the remodel. And then I'll get him going in the next few days. And I go out there with a cast and a suit, and I'm like, look, I didn't come here to help you remodel your house. I mean, I want to be a loan officer. And so it got off to a rocky start, but look, I got really lucky in that he had a great sales manager at the time, and he did kind of take me under his wing, encouraged me to go to Sales Mastery. I've told this story before, but I went to Sales Mastery, Todd Duncan's event, after about 60 days in the mortgage business.
Wow.
I just turned 20 years old. And look, that's what set me up for the future. I had a vision of what the top performers in this industry can do and what the possibilities are. And I didn't get there overnight by any means, but I had a vision, and I was blown away when I think it was one of the first years that, Tim Brahim was up on stage, and Barry Habib, and Stephen Marshall, and just all these people who were just icons in our industry, both then and now.
Still today.
And this was in 1997. So it was great. And that's how I got in the mortgage business.
So I want to clarify on something. Did he pay you $2,000 or $2,000 a month?
So $2,000 a month for 3 months.
Okay.
But get this.
Minimum wage is about that, right?
Yeah, it was about, it wasn't much. It was close. It was close to what I was making, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that was cool. But it's something I do for people today, right? Pay a 3-month guarantee, and then you're on your own. Pretty standard. Right. But anyway, here's what he said. He goes, if you get any loans, then, and you want to come off of the guarantee in order to get the commission, you can do that, but you can't come back on. And so I'm like, okay, well, whatever, we'll see. The very first month, Jimmy, I get a loan, right? It was a friend of mine's sister, and I do the loan and the commission, and I get the commission, and then I get my paycheck and there's no commission. And I go to the bookkeeper. I'm like, I didn't get any commission. And and my dad's like, well, yeah, you're still on the guarantee. Did you want to come off of that? Or did you want I'm like, well, no, not really. And she's like, Jim, pay him some commission. It's his first month. He closed the loan. He's like, that's not the way we do it here. So, look, it's all good. I did come off commission though. I had loans in my pipeline, and I didn't kill it by any means. Like I said, I was not an overnight success, but I've made a good living in the mortgage business from the very first months that I got in.
Well, hey, I mean, to go to Sales Mastery, I mean, that's quite an epic event, and especially to go in at 60 days. My goodness, it took me years to go to any personal development stuff, but nobody really pushed me, I mean, I didn't have that good sales manager that you're talking about. I was pretty much like, okay, Jimmy, here's the corner, and, here's a little area for you to set up your personal computer that you're going to bring in, and then here's a phone, here's some leads, call them. I literally called somebody, they said, I want to take an application, and I didn't even know what to do. Like that's how much training I got. That's so cool that I mean, despite the hardships, you at least did get some training, and then go to Sales Mastery. Man, you must have just come back from that. How big was your notebook full of things that you wanted to do?
I
I
still
bet.
have it. I still have it. I've been to sales mastery so many times. I mean, it changed my life, to be honest with you. I took so many notes, but you know, can you imagine being at sales mastery and not drinking age? I couldn't, a mortgage conference and you're not old enough to drink. That's hilarious.
Well, that's certainly funny. And I mean, I couldn't imagine that, if I'm honest. I couldn't imagine somebody being most of what I've gone through has been in Vegas though. So I mean, you're not going to get in anyway. But I mean, it's difficult to imagine also somebody under the age of 21 actually focusing on mortgage and going all out into it. I thought I was young at 23, but yeah, 20 like so. Okay, so you're starting out at 20. What do people take you seriously? That's one of the biggest things that like a lot of times people. Phil Treadwell and I were talking about this. Like, listen, you should put on a suit and you should get this, that, so that people take you seriously, not like in case they don't. So they do take you seriously. What was your struggle with that, or what's your story with that?
Dude, that's exact. I listened to your interview with Phil Treadwell and I'm like, that is exactly what I did. I got a suit and a tie. I still wear a suit and tie. I'm not wearing one today. I'm not at
I
the
know, right?
office.
It's all good.
But if you go visit me in an office or if you work for me, everyone knows that I wear a suit all the time. And people go, why do you wear a suit? And it's like, well, that's what I had to do because people either thought that I was, skipping school. If I didn't have a suit on, they probably assumed I was supposed to be in class. I mean, look, I was that young out making sales calls at real estate offices. And so I always wore a suit. I just knew that it was incumbent on me to play the role. It's also the reason why I really took to learning about the financial side of our business, right? Fiscal literacy, understanding, the things that Barry Habib teaches, right? I mean, those things were something I really gravitated to very early because I wanted to be able to speak intelligently about our industry. And I knew that that would be a differentiator. And if people could know that I had the knowledge, then they would learn to respect me, even though I was super young. And I used to love, I'd have realtors, that would refer me out and they would always have to put the disclaimer in, he's really young, but he does a great job and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, do you have to say that part? Like, oh, he's really young. Like no one needs the disclaimer, but yeah, man, it was a challenge starting at that age. And, for most of my career, I was, one of the youngest guys around. And as you can imagine, by the time I was in my mid 20s, I was ready to be into management and leadership. I was a VP when I was 27.
Oh,
It's hard to be taken seriously when you're still, one of the youngest guys in the room. But so I'm used to that, and I didn't have a problem with it.
I mean, the majority of our industry, if you look at the upper echelons, they're in their 60s. It's just the truth. And I love how you mentioned the three names you did: Tim Brahim, Steve Marshall, Barry Habib, because I'm envisioning myself the very first time that I saw them writing all these notes. I still quote them today. Like I still like part of my speech is literally stuff that I've written down at Stephen Marshall's event in Vegas. My goodness, how am I spacing out on the name of the
Mastermind.
Mastermind. And anyway, that's just awesome. So you're a VP at 27. So okay, let's when would you say that you started like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I'm and start to, actually advance? I have a bunch of referral partners coming in, and when did you start like building a team? How far into it did you have to go before you started doing that?
Yeah, that's actually interesting. So, my dad was pretty old school. I got a lot of respect for the things I learned in the 9 years that I worked for my dad. But having an assistant wasn't one of those things that you did. And to be honest with you, going to Sales Mastery and other industry events, I was also a huge fan of Joe Stumpf and the by referral only program. I learned a lot of my scripting and presentation around how to build clients for life through that program as well. But I was really involved. I've always been kind of a seminar junkie. Look, I didn't go to college. And so I listened to audiobooks in my car. I was a big Zig Ziglar fan in my early years. And, well, still am, but he was very influential in my ongoing pursuit of learning outside of, a college or a traditional educational environment. I've always done that. I still do that today. And so what had happened is that, I guess to answer your question, I felt really confident by the time I was about 23 years old. I was making a 6-figure income. I had bought a house. I felt like this is stable, and I knew that I could continue, that, the money wasn't just going to go away. And so that was probably around 23. So maybe 3 or 4 years after I got in the business is when I felt like the big peaks and valleys were out of my business. But I didn't hire an assistant or build a team until probably 10 years into my mortgage career. I just did it all by myself and was taught that that's really the way to do it. And it wasn't until I was introduced to some of these people growing teams. And keep in mind, it was a different time. Like
it really was. Yeah. Teams weren't really,
no.
They were, it wasn't almost, now it's basically required. You really can't do everything now, but back in, I don't want to say back in the day. Truly, like the farther back you go, you could do everything. You could do every little last piece of it and still have time to, I guess have a personal life. But look, you moved into management though, kind of in between that. Did you go to management and then come back? Talk about your transition into, you say you're a VP when you were 27.
Yeah. So I was the vice president of retail operations for my dad's company when I was in my mid-20s. And so he had a retail division and he had a wholesale division, and I ran the retail division. And so the challenge was, and the reason why I ultimately left there is because, look, I was going to these conferences, I was going to seminars, I was networking, I was meeting people that were some of the top producers in our industry. And it was my responsibility to recruit them and grow the retail side of that company at the time. And I just couldn't do it, to be honest with you. I would meet with people, but we just didn't, as a company, invest in the things that everyone else was doing at the time. And I'll give you some examples. Back then, it was, everyone had to have a database, because before that you didn't really have a database. So now, it was it was ACT, or it was some other, you had a box full of like Rolodex cards or something. But anyway, but now everyone's like providing their loan officers with tools and resources. And it was things like a database. It was a marketing program. This is when Loan Toolbox was coming out. And there was some of these other, programs that I felt that loan officers needed to be incorporated into their business. And really a company should be providing those. And today, all companies, for the most part, provide these, what we would consider basic tools now. But it was during that time where this evolution was happening. And so I felt like I was banging my head against the wall, trying to convince my dad, who had been doing this business 30 years before me, saying, well, we don't need to do all that stuff. That just cuts into our margin. And I'm like, well, then I can't recruit anybody. And we would butt heads. And finally, I just said, look, I need to just go do something different with a company who's going to embrace, these ideas. And so I actually, at that point, interviewed with only 2 companies. I kind of knew where I wanted to go. The first place I thought I was going to go, it just didn't give me the warm and fuzzy. So I went to the next company. And man, it changed my life, to be honest with you. I went there. I said, I don't want any management role. I will start from the ground up. I just went there as a loan officer. And that is where I built the team. So soon after joining that company, I was so busy because I was out sharing with all my referral partners that I had made a move and the excitement that I had and why I was excited about it. And it just generated a lot of activity. This was in 2006. So there was a really good market anyways. And I had so many loans, I literally couldn't get to them. And that's when the company's like, well, you need an assistant. I'm like, what? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so they took a processor, out of their company and said, hey, I hired her as my assistant, and the rest is history. Ultimately, I had to grow my team just so that I could move back into management. So quick story about the company I joined. It was called it was called Mortgage Advisory Group. They were only about 2 years in the business, and I didn't know what I didn't know when I joined that company. And what I learned as I started kind of getting settled in there is that this was not a very sophisticated platform yet. And what I mean by that is they started as a net branch, and then we're like a broker shop. And they were just starting to do correspondent lending. They had only captive warehouse lines. They did not have any delegated underwriting authority. And I came from an environment at my dad's company where the underwriter was literally down the hall, and I could, work through challenging transactions and get them done. And here, their underwriter was really just a person who took the underwriting approval from the other company, put it onto their own letterhead, and sent it out as your underwriting conditions. I'm like, you're not even like involved in the decision making of this loan. And to be honest with you, I was frustrated at first.
I would
And
call that a processor. I mean, that's a processor, and effectively, so it's branch, meaning that, like, look, it's a glorified broker in a sense.
I call them a super broker. Yeah, it's a super broker is what I call it. It's not, whatever.
It's against brokers. We have a lot of friends who are brokers, but just like there's not. It's a different game.
It's a different game, and it wasn't what I thought I had signed up for, I guess, is the bottom line. And so at first I was frustrated, but then I talked to the owners, and they were cool guys. And really what happened is they said, well, help us make this place better, help us become the company that we want to be. And I said, yeah, let's do that. And so I just worked very closely with them. We talked through why we should get our FHA full delegation. Remember, this is like 07, when everyone was doing subprime loans. No one did FHA, but I was like an FHA guy. Like, I was like, why would we put someone in a subprime loan when we could fix their credit and get them in a good, decent loan that's not going to like explode on them in 2 years? And so, I was just a big advocate for, let's do it this way. And I remember they were like, one of the owners, he's a great guy, good friend of mine still today. But he goes, why would we get signed up to do our own FHA loans? Because then if the underwriter like declines it, you can't go to another company and get it done there. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why don't you just hire underwriters who approve loans that are insurable by FHA? Like, what do you mean? He's like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like, who do we go after? And so anyway, it was a fun process, because this is where I really learned how to be an executive in the mortgage space, because we truly worked together and built out a company to be a full-fledged mortgage banking platform. And I was able to, play a role in that while also originating loans as well. And ultimately became the president and chief operating officer of that company. And we ran that until 2014 when we sold it. So that's
wow.
That was 9 years that I really had the very fortunate opportunity for someone who didn't own a company to sit in that seat where you're truly making all the day-to-day decisions. It's a rare opportunity for a lot of people who come up through the sales side of the business and aren't willing to put their own money and risk to run a company, but to be able to have that exposure into kind of how mortgage companies operate.
Brother, I thought you were going to tell me that here you're talking about direct endorsement, FHA underwriters. We're going full Eagle correspondent, and that was like a huge thing of like, you have to do that. I thought you were going to literally say, and then 2008 happened. So you like, but that's the time you're getting into it, and you're literally growing this. And look, that I would say, like, boy, you couldn't have had a happier ending with that. What, talk about going through that time. What were your biggest challenges, and what happened?
So here's the thing. And the reason I brought up the FHA direct endorsement, because it was like 2% market share in the subprime days. But as soon as subprime went away, FHA went to 55% market share, like literally overnight.
And if you didn't have it, you were out of business almost.
If you didn't have it, you were out of business. And guess who had it? And all these other small independent mortgage bankers were literally in line trying to get there. It took months. They got way backlogged. I don't know if you remember all this, but this was our competitive advantage. We got it early. And as a result, the company grew, rather quickly at that time. And that's what got us through the crash. We were a small independent mortgage banker who survived, through the big crash of 2008. And quite frankly, our best days were ahead of that. And in 2009 and 10 and 11, we just had great growth. And I'll tell you, my personal experience was that because I didn't do subprime loans, when rates dropped in 2009 and 10, and everybody is exiting the mortgage industry, I'm doing like streamline refinances, baby. Like you would believe. I had some of my best years ever in 2009 and 10 because my database was filled with people who had prime loans that could benefit from all the stimulus that was happening and quantitative easing and what happened to rates during that time. And I didn't have a book of people with toxic mortgages.
Brother, I love that. That's such a great story. It reminds me of Stephen Marshall talking about how he literally went from zero referral partners, built it all from nothing in the same time.
He's
When
in my
everybody
market,
else,
by the way.
what's that?
He's in my market.
Oh, I know he is. Oh, I know he is. I've talked to a lot of mutual friends that I love his story. I'm gonna have to have him on the podcast too. But
You should.
this is about Tony Blodgett though. You're so okay. That's really awesome. I really want to get to Jeeps in a second, but I want you to talk because I love Jeeps. I'm a big Jeep guy myself. But I want to talk about New American Funding, your current position, and I guess how you got into that. Did you just start from like, okay, you sell the you're part of the sale, you're a chief operating officer and mortgage advisory, and how do you transition into the next role that you play?
Yeah. Okay. So we sold that company. 2014 was tough. 2013 was tough. 2014 we were too small. We had to sell, or we had to merge, or we had to do something. And so ultimately, that's what we did. And look, when you're the company that's being acquired, and you're the president and the COO, I kind of knew there might not be a spot for me on the other side. I worked really hard to help put the deal together. And on paper, it was a really good deal. It was great for the owners of the company. It was good for the company that was acquiring us. And I think it was good for our loan officers. At least it appeared to be on paper. The execution of that did not go super awesome. And I'm not really going to get into the reasons why. I don't think it had anything to do with us. But nonetheless, it was what it was. And I decided, I talked, because when we sold the company, me and the two owners became equal three-way partners in the new the new division, if you will, of the company that we joined or sold to. And I quickly realized it just wasn't going to work for me. And they were very capable of doing what needed to be done at that time. And so I gracefully kind of, bowed out. I let it be known, to the marketplace that I was looking for opportunities. And I was actually contacted by, a headhunting firm with this opportunity at New American Funding. And here's the thing, I had never heard of New American Funding. I didn't know anything about them. But I'll tell you this is when I was introduced to them and I had an opportunity to learn more about the company and meet the owners and Sam, who's my boss, who's a really good, friend of mine now. Man, I got to tell you, I was like, this company is everything that Mortgage Advisory Group wanted to be when we grew up. And I mean, everything from the way they did their marketing, the fact they serviced all their loans, it was still a family owned company. It still is today. All of these things I was so passionate about. It's literally the exact same platform that I had been building and selling and recruiting to, but now had all the things we didn't have, which was, the volume and the national footprint and, the servicing and the Fannie and Freddie and the Ginnie and all those things that I hoped to get us to someday. So for me, honestly, I was like, I don't know the divine intervention that brought New American into my life, but it was a perfect fit for what I thought a mortgage banker should be. And so it was great. And here's the other great thing is they wanted a presence in the Northwest. They had started to open some branches up in the Northwest, but they had done it kind of from the corporate office, and, kind of like an expansion of their California presence, if you will, as opposed to someone building, a full infrastructure in the Northwest, which is just what you have to do. If you're going to move into a market like the Northwest, I mean, it's a very difficult, competitive market.
Yeah.
And the people that work there's great companies that are based out of the Northwest. And some of them are gone now or they got acquired, but still great people. It's a really good, there's just really mature mortgage professionals in the Northwest. And look, loan officers expect an environment where they can, talk to the underwriter and everything's local. And so when I met with New American Funding, I wrote like a 3-page letter about what I envisioned would be a growth strategy for them in the Northwest and what would be necessary. And, because of my background in operations and sales, I felt like I could help them build that. And they said, look, we've had some success and some failures growing in different areas. And everything that you wrote there is exactly what we have learned is necessary to be successful in a build like this. And I said, well, then great, we have an alignment. And so that's what I set off to do in 2014. And I got pretty fortunate in that, things continued to crumble at the other company after I left. And I had an opportunity to bring over pretty much all of my operations team. And I hadn't hired any loan officers yet. So I went to New American and I was like, hey, remember that little like business plan I wrote? Remember the part about like having an operations team? Like, I know I haven't recruited any loan officers yet, but I got these 14 people that I want to bring over, underwriters, processors, right? And look, they believed in what we were doing and put that deal together. And so we started off within 60 to 90 days having a fully regional operations platform in place that was really a group of people who had been working together and running a mortgage company for years. And so we kind of had this very mature operations platform. And then I got to work, growing the production side of the business. And we started by, we're doing about 7 or 8 million in the Northwest when I joined, and we were doing, a little over 40 million a month at the end of the first year.
Wow, that's incredible. And I talked to Travis Neubauer. I know you guys know each other. He said, look, it's competitive over there. And here to be starting at 7-8, going to 40, that's pretty incredible. You built it and then they came. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. You kind of have to do it that way though.
Yeah, but it's hard because most companies won't do that, and had I not had this group of, people that had been working together and could just kind of move over, I don't know, man. There's no way we would have had the success that we had. I had a world-class team. And I gotta be honest with you, when I put the deal together with New American and I knew that I didn't have, I had 12 direct reports that were all VP level. And I'm like, the team does all the work, man. I'm going to be honest with you. And so it's like, how am I going to build this thing without my VP of lending operations? I don't have a CFO. I don't have any of these people that guide me and help me, move this thing along. And so I was really nervous. And so when that came together the way that it did, look, I'll take my ops team with me. I love my sales guys. Look, I got a great sales team, but I'll take my ops team first because if you don't have that, there ain't no salespeople going to stick around very long when you can't get their loans closed. So
it's just the truth. It really is. Operations really is. It's so important, underappreciated a lot of the time. Okay, I want to move to Jeep. So look, I've seen you drive through like the most insane places. Like you're driving through rivers, you're driving over rocks. You have the truck version, and gosh, I can't believe I'm spacing on. What's the truck version of the Jeep?
Gladiator.
It's the Gladiator. So you have the Gladiator, but then you have this massive like tent on the top of it with all sorts of stuff on it. I gotta talk about Jeeps with you for just a minute. So what do you have, and like Jeep wise, and then tell me about some adventures that you take with it.
Yeah. So look, the reason I have Jeeps is because I love off-roading. I love dirt bikes and all those things. But let's be honest, I'm in my mid 40s now. And, it's just, I want a cage around me, like airbags and stuff. And so look, the Jeep was something that I got excited about when I saw the Gladiator came out. My wife had a Jeep when she was younger. And so we had talked about getting one. And I've always had a pickup truck because, I ride dirt bikes and do that, live on acreage, and you have to have a truck. And so when the Gladiator came out, I'm like, well, that's a truck and it's a Jeep. And it's like, perfect. Check. And so we bought it. And then I just connected with some friends that, go wheeling at some of the local ORV parks. And I started going out and doing some wheeling at some of these parks. And it's pretty extreme, some of these trails. And here I am driving a $65,000 Gladiator over these like crazy trails. And I'm like, maybe this isn't the best idea. But I love the Jeeping aspect of it. So I actually went and bought a 2006 Jeep LJ, which is it's the first unlimited version of a Jeep, right? So what that means is it's a two-door Jeep, but it's 15 inches longer than a regular two-door Jeep. So it was basically what they came out with before they came out with the four-door. They came out with an extended version of a two-door. It's called a Jeep Unlimited, or an LJ, which stands for long Jeep. It's really a TJ Unlimited. Anyway, I digress. The Jeep guys are going to know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. No,
okay, good.
I actually sold cars back in the day of that 2006. I actually sold that exact car, or Jeep, and I always thought, like, why would you want the extra little spot? I wasn't a Jeep enthusiast at the time I was selling them, but yeah, that's it is. It adds to the wheelbase. You know, you're less likely to flip. And then I think it was the year after that they came out with the JK, which I bought a JK. And dude, we're so far into nerd on Jeep on this, but so go ahead.
Okay, so I bought the 06 LJ so that I could have kind of like more of a rock crawling, more extreme rig that wasn't as expensive. But by the time I got done with it, and all the stuff I put into it, axles and all, I spent plenty of money on it. But anyway,
it looks that way. But I've seen all of it. Like, brother, you have your wife must say, like, oh, it's another Jeep part, isn't it? Like, I can imagine like what shows up at your front door. My wife gets on me for Amazon stuff. Like, oh my gosh, what'd you do? But these are huge boxes of things. Like, my goodness.
I've had to take more than one trip to the dump with a full load of cardboard more than once. But anyway, here's the other thing about the LJ is, I did a lot of I called a friend of mine that we went to school together, and, I built that, with my own hands. It was awesome. And my son was out there helping me, and I got a shop on my property, and I'm just really blessed to have a great property and where I can do that kind of stuff. And so I've installed a car lift, and we put the lift and all the stuff on the Jeep, and it was just a fun experience to build that out. But as soon as I got that done, and that was kind of more of my extreme vehicle, one thing that I really wanted to do, and my son's been bugging me about going camping and stuff, and so I wanted to convert the Jeep Gladiator into more of like an overlanding rig, which is really big right now. And so that's the one you're talking about. I put a bed rack on the back and a rooftop tent, and outfitted it with all the gear that you need to go camping and overlanding. And I've had really only one major opportunity with one of my branch managers who's down in Oregon, and a bunch of other guys got together, some mortgage guys and some not. There was eight of us, I think, and we went on a pretty epic multi-day trip through Eastern Oregon. And we have some other stuff planned now that we're going to be doing in the future. So I'm excited to just do some camping and some overlanding. But being able to take a rig like that can basically go anywhere and bring your tent and all your stuff with you, it's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie.
Pretty badass. Absolutely. All right. Well, brother, I really love this story. There's a couple of questions that we ask everybody that comes on, and I'm going to start with the first one. So, do you feel like you ever got a big break?
Yeah, well, I think getting hired by my dad honestly was a break. I talk about it from the stance like, hey, you should have just like ushered me in the front door, right? But look, that was a big break. I had no mortgage experience, and I was brought into an opportunity that most people wouldn't have had. So that was a huge break as far as I'm concerned. And that's probably the number one thing. Look, obviously that's changed my life completely. And it gave me a relationship with my dad that I didn't have because we worked together for 9 years. And it launched my career. It got me out of driving a truck. So that's a huge break that a lot of people would not have the opportunity to have, for sure.
I love that. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
As I tell the story, you don't want me to tell, but that's all right. Was there ever a time, Tony, you thought about giving up?
Never. Not even a thought. Giving up is not something that's really in my vocabulary. So, I'm a one direction person, and it's forward, not that we don't get kicked back sometimes, but you just keep going forward. So I've never honestly thought about giving up. It's not something I do.
Boy, your boy Travis said the same exact way. I just love how instant you are. No, it was like not even close. Like it was just like close. I really love that. If you were to do it all over again, Tony, what would you change?
Dude, I knew you were going to ask me this question because I've watched your podcast. And I want to say to you nothing, right? But that's not really true. The one thing that I would do different, we didn't talk about this, but my mom got really sick when she was about 49 years old. And she had early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, and passed away when she was 60. But that 10 years between when she got diagnosed and when she passed away, it was brutal. She was nonverbal for most of it. And
Oh,
if I had it all to do over again, to be honest with you, Jimmy, I was I told you, like, I was like 18, I moved out of my parents' house. Like I'm an adult, I'm on my own. And that 10 years, I was out building my own life, and I would have spent more time with my parents, my mom in particular, during those 10 years. If I knew that I wouldn't have her, for the rest of my life, I definitely would have spent more time with my mom for those reasons.
boy, that's just real. But don't you think that she would have wanted you to build your own life?
Yeah, I think she was probably the most proud of me of anyone, but doesn't mean that I couldn't have fit more time in to go visit more often and, go take her out to lunch, while she was at work or whatever. And we did that on occasion. I just kind of wish I would have done it a lot more and just spent more time, because you just can't get that back.
Yeah, brother, that's just super real. Spend time with your loved ones. You can't get any more real than that. All right, to final question to set it up. Tony, there's somebody out there that is, being raised by truck drivers. Maybe they didn't have a whole heck of a lot growing up. Maybe they are working two jobs. Maybe they're just they're struggling to even find their way. Maybe they're young. Maybe they're not looked at seriously. Maybe they're in a job where they have big shoes to fill. What advice would you give to someone looking to get it done?
Look, I think you got to invest in yourself. There's so many ways that you can learn a new craft, you can gain knowledge, you can make yourself better. And that's what I would tell someone to do. Look, no one's going to do it for you. You might have a big break. You might have, opportunities present themselves all the time, but you need to be prepared to capitalize on them. And the only way to do that and gain the confidence that you need and be ready for the opportunity that might come. Look, mine came from a dirt bike accident that pushed me over the edge to reach out and really push for this job. I didn't know that was going to happen. That wasn't in my plan. But I was prepared to do what I needed to do at that time. So be a constant learner, get an account with Audible, listen to audiobooks, podcasts, other information, anything you want to learn. The information's out there. And in almost every case, it's free or very inexpensive. It just requires you to be committed to turn off Netflix and turn on, something educational, and give yourself the knowledge that you need to accomplish whatever it is you want to pour yourself into. And then as you immerse yourself in gaining that knowledge, keep your eyes open, because the opportunities will start presenting themselves right in front of you, if that's what you're focused on.
I really love that. You got to do the work. And actually, you're there's money in the streets. Just to plug Barry's book there. But yeah, there's opportunities everywhere, and I really love the way that you took that. That's beautiful, brother. Thanks for that. Well, I want to thank our audience for joining us today, and I want to especially thank Tony. Brother, this has just been a great story. I really enjoyed this. If anybody was looking to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, probably just through my social media. So I got a Facebook page, just, my name, Tony Blodgett, or on Instagram. Probably the best one is at Tony Blodgett CMB. And yeah, reach out to me there. My DMs are open. So that'd be a great place to connect.
All right, that's beautiful. And look, we'll put that in the podcast description. All right, this has been the Get It Done podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And if you like the show, tell a friend, write us a 5-star review, hit that subscribe button. All those things make a huge difference in helping us reach more people. Once again, I am Jimi Ryan. This has been the Get It Done podcast. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Jimmy.